Take that, Christian.
How many different Cal shirts you got?
I got quite a few. I got a nice little collection there, but
When's the last time you've been to a game over there?
actually a couple years ago, I actually got to go watch Vincent's, my nephew's last game.
Feeling good about Devin's potential to play on Sunday?
We'll see. Again, we'll go through tomorrow and the rehab and all that good stuff and see how he is. Dante moved around very well. He really did. They worked him really hard yesterday. He had no residuals this morning, so we put him out there and let him do his normal routine. And hopefully he has no ill effects tomorrow morning.
The last time he played Tampa Bay, James had a very noteworthy game matching up with Mike Evans. He described his past 3 games, though, as inconsistent. I guess in your words, how would you describe the last 3 games for James Bradbury?
I think that's a fair assessment because you watch the many good things that he does and then something bad happened in each one of those games, and he knows it. And I really appreciate him characterizing that because I do think that's a very fair assessment. I mean, the young man has played spectacular for us at times and done really good things, and then unfortunately a little inconsistency. And I think that goes along with as he continues to grow and learn that position.
Back in middle of November when we were asking about the CJ move and Christian's workload and all of that, you said something that was interesting. You said the way Christian runs, he protects himself. What specifically do you mean by that?
Well, I don't think he exposes himself to big hits. And again, the way he's built, the way he runs, I think he can handle the load. I do know that part of it also is, and as Norv characterized it, I think last week or something, just put, that you're going to have these types of games, but he's not necessarily going to have these types of games all the time. So there are some games where he may touch the ball more than others. There are some games where he may be tackled more than others. So I think that's probably the thing that, we all have to understand, that we're not putting him in that position exactly every game.
Playing with Cam had a good effect on Christian in terms of, you kind of saw last year the way he carried himself. He was real. He seemed a little bit, I guess, maybe more on the uptight side, stressed obviously as a rookie, learning so many things. But it seems like he's having a little bit, playing a little looser out there.
Right, and I think you see that growth, because he's playing with such confidence. I think a lot of it has to do with he knows what we do now. Last year there was a lot of learning that he had to do. We moved him a lot more last year. I think we had him out in the slot a lot more than we did this year. And you can say the same thing about when you watch DJ and the way he's performed. I mean, the first part of the year, there was a lot of learning. We asked him to do a lot of things. And then, Coach and them just felt that on the offensive side, they need to limit that role for him and create the right type, which I think they feel really good about. So now we're talking about a guy when we asked him to focus on specific things, you could see that growth, and that's what we're seeing in DJ. That's what we're starting to see in Curtis. And I think that's what's helping those young guys in terms of being part of our offense.
Ron, did Devin move around pretty well today?
He did. He looked good at times. We'll see how he is in the morning. As I said, they had him go through the individuals, and he had some specific routes and stuff that he ran.
Ron, Thomas Davis today admitted to us that it's kind of been frustrating defensively, the inconsistency with the personnel that you all have had on the roster and in previous years. I know you're all trying to put a finger on how to improve this defense. What have you seen, I guess, from watching the film back on Monday to this week in practice that leads you to believe that there's still time for this defense to really start turning the corner and making some plays that you mentioned on Sunday?
Well, I think you look at some of the guys you have out there. I mean, when first of all, I think when your defense led by Luke Kuechly, I think there's some really good things that can happen. You've got KK Short, who's part of that defensive line, and you throw in a Mario and a Julius, and you feel really strong about that group. You couple the linebackers with Luke and TD and Shaq, and you feel good about that. I mean, again, the inconsistencies come at. If there is one thing that has been inconsistent for us, has been the same type of depth at defensive back. I think when you look at it, we returned 2 starters from last year's secondary. My 8 seasons here, we haven't had the same starting secondary. So there's a lot of that you got to work through, and that's part of it. There's some young guys that we have in some roles that we're expecting a lot from, and there's some other guys that we need to get more from. And we'll see how it unfolds when we get into Sunday's game. But I like the way they're practicing. I like the energy they've moved around with today. I like how they've handled the situation, circumstances. But we'll see. That's why you play them on Sunday.
When you think about what you guys have done on the road this year, what couple of plays stand out that you kind of shaped the misfortune you guys have had on the road?
Well, I think you go back and you look at certain games, specific games. The Washington game comes to mind right away, and the Atlanta game. You talk about the run fits, Then you look at Detroit and you look at last week and you think about plays up over the top. I mean, those 4 games specifically are the ones that when you look at it, something happened that was very specific to reasoning why we lost. And again, you can 2 games you can point directly to fitting the run up, and 2 could be that we gave up big plays up over the top.
That inconsistency in the secondary from a personnel standpoint year over year, is that something that gets better as the year goes on? I know you added Eric after 4 or 5 weeks.
I think it can. I really do. I mean, you look at some of the play of some of the guys, and you feel like they're on the come. They're developing. I mean, we had a tough go of it last week, and I think part of it can be attributed that one of our starting corners goes out on the first defensive play. But we do have guys in position that they're in backup roles that they have to be ready to roll, and it should be a next man up mentality. And unfortunately, we gave up some plays.
Is it hard when the starting inside corner is kind of it seemed like he moved outside at times?
He did, and quite honestly, Cap has been a very steady nickel in this league for like the last 5 years, and I think PFF has him rated as one of the top nickels, but we had to move him outside because of the necessity to do it. We played a young guy also outside as well that has been really focusing on at the nickel, and that's Korn. And and again, looking at that, we've got to make sure that those guys get a few more reps on the outside and work a little bit more just in case.
Does the personnel that Tampa Bay has from a wide receiver standpoint, does that kind of lend itself to more of that nickel package because they're so fat because of Humphreys and?
Well, I think you got to look at what we did the first time and then look at what they're doing now and see how you're going to use it. Because they do a few things differently. They do a few things differently with the different quarterbacks, and we've got to make sure we can match it properly, absolutely.
When you guys evaluate depth now across the secondary, do you have to follow the same pattern that you are now following in terms of complementary corners and kind of a smaller, faster guy on one side and then find a depth piece for him?
You have to find it just because of who's in your division, first and foremost. I mean, the old saying goes, you want to win your division, you got to control your division. Well, part of being able to control the division is being able to match up offensively, defensively, special teams. I mean, the first thing we have to do is we look at, defensively, look at their offense and say, okay, can we match up with their wide receivers course? How do we feel about handling their tight ends? What can we do to try and slow the running game down? And then you also look at the quarterback. I mean, do you have strong arm quarterbacks that get the ball downfield in a big way, or do you have smart, crafty quarterbacks that work laterally and off the right play action and throw it deep? You've got to be able to match that first and foremost before you can do anything else. If you can't match with the receivers, i.e. the situation we had in 2016 when Julio went nuts on us in Atlanta.
I think, yeah, and like to your point with the depth specifically, it then becomes maybe that much more of a deeper scouting process to find in a narrower pool now.
It is, and it is difficult, and it's one of the things that Marty and I sit down and talk about constantly as far as what we got going for next year. We've already talked on a couple of occasions about looking towards certain positions for next season and where do we need to build on depth, whether that depth be in the secondary, the offensive line, the defensive line. What are our primary needs of depth, and we've, like I said, we've already broached that subject.
Those 3 position groups you just mentioned, Ron, or would those be the 3 you're kind of thinking about at this point?
No, that would be the 3 I used as an example to answer Jordan's question. If you take a step back and you look at all the positions that we have, when we start talking about that, we'll have to look at salaries as far as whose contracts are up, years in the league. I mean, there's a lot of things that we will go through in determining what position specifically we'll be looking at going into the draft.
Ron, when it comes to the practice facility, you've always said you kind of let David Tepper handle that. There's been some conversation about down in York County, them looking at land down there. Is that something that the team obviously would be welcome to having a practice facility down there, especially involving South Carolina, like you guys have always talked about being 2 states?
Yeah, I mean, that would be cool. I mean, mostly because I live down south that area, so it'd be easy to drive for me. But I think having a facility like that would be outstanding. Whether it is in North or South Carolina, it really truly is about the one team for the 2 states, and I think that'd be a great part of it. I do know that that we have plans in terms of what the building is going to look like. We hope. I know we have talked about that. I know Mr. Tepper is obviously talking about some different areas, but until he comes out and talks about specifically, I'd be remiss to say that one way or the other. But I do know that having a facility, a quality facility, could be very beneficial to this organization and to both North and South Carolina.
When you play the same team twice, obviously it happens all the time, but do you find that you have to switch up your game plan?
Yes, you most certainly do, because again, they're going to look and see how you attack them, and then they're going to figure, okay, they had success doing it this way. What's to say they're not gonna? You have to have an answer, and again, because of what you did against them previously and what you did the last week, and that's one of the things we talk about when I talk about going back and watching tape and correcting things. Because what's going to happen is if you're giving this up, well, I'm going to tell you right now, teams are going to come out and attack that. So one of the things we've talked about specifically on the defensive side is guarding against the deep ball. I mean, it's shown that we've given it up a couple weeks in a row, so it's coming.
Ron, do you have an idea of what the corner rotation might look like Sunday?
Yeah.
Next week.
I think again, as far as the corners are concerned, we'll play the game as necessary. The question earlier about being the matchup. I mean, again, we know who their 2 primary targets are, but we also have to account for Humphreys. We also account for the fact that their number 1 tight end is on IR, and how we'll match up with that. So the rotation will be dictated based on what we get as far as personnel groupings.
Thank you.
All right, cool. Thank you guys.